Hello everyone, I'm DonTheCrown, and today I want to talk about the build that I'm currently playing in the Slormancer on the Huntress, and we're also going to do a second section of this video for kind of the build that I was kind of playing in the early to mid-ish game. I would say that we're kind of getting into the end game right now. We haven't beaten all of the early Netherrealm bosses and stuff yet, but we're level 100, so let's just show you a little gameplay here. Just going to go into the battlefield on rank 10, which is the highest wrath we can get. And pretty much the gameplay is just very fast, as you can probably tell. We're just moving around a lot and have a lot going on. Lots of projectiles bouncing everywhere, enemies just dying, and a lot of movement speed as well. And another thing that's really cool is we, thanks to some legendaries, and there's not really like any necessary legendaries that you need in order to play this build, but due to our legendary hat, we do have some tremendous reset potential on our movement skill, and so we can just kind of spam it a little bit, which is pretty nice. And yeah, basically the build is very strong. There's definitely some weaknesses right now that I'm going to be working on ironing out into the tippity top end game as we work into the end of Netherrealm and moving past that point. But yeah, it's pretty great. So the basic skill that we're using here is Void Arrow. This is basically our bread and butter. This is what's killing 99.9% of enemies, and it bounces all over the place. And we want to be casting it while we are in the Tormented mode. And so in this game, they kind of have a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing for other ARPGs, where if you have to press more than one button on the Huntress, you become Tormented, whereas spamming one button on the Huntress makes you be delighted. And so, yeah, if you've played other ARPGs, you might know that it's kind of like a thing in ARPGs where people are always trying to get builds to be as simple as possible, pressing one button to kill everything. I kind of think that that's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there. But let's just kind of talk about it real quick. If you're not sure already how that works, basically as you spam one single skill, so if I spam my left click here, the green meter goes up, and when I use different skills, it goes down accordingly. And Void Arrow is basically this really powerful blast that normally, if I am not in Tormented mode, takes a long time to charge up. But when I am Tormented, it's instant and it shoots a ton of arrows, which just really makes it super great for clearing rooms, clearing zones all over the place, and it just kind of goes absolutely haywire. Just freaking everywhere. You can kind of like see how much it bounces inside one room. And let's just go over the skills for that real quick. So the first level, and where you can only pick one of these per row, by the way, is going to be Pierced by the Void. This gives it so a fully charged Void Arrow has a 100% rebound chance, and then we're going to have 5 arrows fired instead of 3 from Almighty Void. Wormhole of the Void makes it so that it applies Wormhole when you hit, and they now do 25% more damage to enemies that have been affected by Wormhole. So anything that you hit twice will take 25% more damage. And then whenever you kill an enemy that's affected by Wormhole, the closest non-boss enemy is absorbed into oblivion. Don't worry, you still get the XP and loot. And yes, this does work against basically everything. And this includes, like, if you're in the Forge, you get one of those like million plus HP obelisks, that will die. That will, like, kill anything near it, and the obelisk will immediately flip over to being a positive obelisk. If you have a invincible enemy in the Forge as well, they'll also get black holed as well, which is really great. And all of this is basically working because of Torment of the Void. So while Tormented, Void Arrow charges instantly. And I think that this is kind of mandatory to play the build, because otherwise the charge speed is really, really slow. You're probably going to have to use like Hyper Void Drifter to get 75% chance here, or 75% faster with the full max 10. But even then, that's a lot slower than just left clicking. So you're probably going to want to use the build that I'll talk about later in the video in order to just farm up mastery ranks on this skill, so you can afford to get this Torment of the Void thing, which I'll talk about later in the video. Our other skill here, the left click, does not really matter what this is. Really, this could be practically any of our skills. I've gone through actually and leveled up every single skill to high enough mastery so that I can unlock all of the trees, just so I can invest into them later so we get more raw damage. But we are basically just using arrow shot because might as well. And so we have additional rebound chance, pierce chance. After each rebound, arrow shot does more damage and does 100% more damage if it hits a wall before it hits a target. So many arrows shoots 3 more arrows, and then it has a 10% chance to fork again when it forks, which is pretty good. You could potentially even use reactive arrow instead to go and poison. I think that this could probably be fine as well. For our specialization, we're picking Sharpshooter of the Wild. This is really just kind of the go fast specialization here. The tumble obviously is a movement skill, which is pretty cool. And then we're getting movement speed, chance that when we land on the tumble, it resets itself automatically. Whenever we cast tumble, if we're tormented, we get critical strike chance. And this stays up even if we like cast it and we're not tormented. We get like a buff basically that stays up with us, which is pretty good. This gives us a Ravenous Dagger that throws down. You could also potentially do like overdrive damage if you really wanted to, or something here. The Ravenous Pace here isn't all that important. The Evasive Fire makes it so that we automatically shoot an arrow shot, which doesn't count towards our tormented state whenever we tumble, which is pretty nice because it will like, go out and just start hitting tons of enemies as we are, just moving around, which can potentially kill stuff. You don't even have to shoot at it. We're also doing a dagger. Whenever we land, all daggers that are nearby kind of go into us, which is pretty nice. You could also switch this out for projectile speed as well. This does help out a little bit with the void arrow. Either one is really fine. I don't really like this repel non-elemental projectiles when they hit. This doesn't really seem to be all that important or all that good, but I could be wrong about that. And then last but not least, while tormented, you ignore the first time your serenity will be increased. And so what this does is allows us to cast void arrow 3 times. So we can go 1, 2, 3, and now we're no longer tormented. And I can just pop my evade. 1, 2, 3. And I can pop my evade again. 1, 2, 3. Pop my evade. 1, 2, 3. Pop my evade. 1, 2, 3. And you get the point here. Basically, one of the things that's important to know is that if you ever don't have tumble up when you become, slightly not tormented, you can just use your left click in order to fix that as well. If you are at like even +3 here accidentally, if you left click and then right click again, you're gonna go right back into tormented, because each time you switch skills, you lose 2 happiness, and so that will take you down pretty nice and easy. If you're wondering how the tumble is resetting, that is coming from our hat, the Awoken. Anytime we become tormented or delighted, the cooldown time of our support skill is reset. This is not mandatory. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it for this part. We've talked about arrow shot, talked about this skill. And yeah, so for the skills, that's pretty much what I recommend. This is very, very fast. Obviously, you can drop stuff like the movement speed or even the reset here for potentially more damage or more defenses. But I'm pretty much just trying to go as fast as I possibly can right now. Just like, especially when we're doing the Slorm Temple, we wanted to go super duper quick because that was basically the limiting factor for us clearing. Just how quick can I move my character around. Now for the bow, I highly recommend the Big Fury Primordial Bow. This basically gives us a ton of raw damage, and we're going to be stacking a lot of raw damage on our gear, even some raw damage on our tree as well. And then the Primordial Benediction makes it so that we get even more raw damage, 457.5 max raw damage, gives us Ellie Pen, which doesn't matter. And the downside is our skills cannot be imbued. If you wanted to instead, like if you're using the lower version of the bow, we got 85 from 179. So the primordial version does make our weapon a lot more powerful. You could potentially even just like use stuff like the Adam Nostris's perfect bow or the bow of the trainee if you really need to. I think that these are both fine, but really the Big Fury Primordial Bow is probably the best in slot end game for us right now. And then let's talk a little bit about stats. So I have a lot of tankiness in my build and my setup right now, and I'm pretty much just primarily focused on having as much of that as I possibly can with toughness. And toughness is just really, really nice to have. This makes us extremely tanky, which is important. It's important to be tanky so you're not dying. And especially this node here. You have tons of elemental resistance based off of your armor. This allows you to stack armor and it turns into LE res, which is just really nice. If you only go this far in the beginning, that's fine. You can put points in other places like bravery or dexterity or even fury as well. I think that that is all fine to do and, could be potentially good. But I really do think that just going super hard in toughness just to make yourself as tanky as possible, give yourself a lot of life, a lot of armor, tenacity, all this stuff is very good to have. For the ancestral stuff, pretty much the important stuff here for me is we go over to air conditioner, which is an aura, which I actually didn't have active, that just slows enemies that are nearby you, their attack speed at least. We go over here, we get more flat raw damage, but most importantly, percentage raw damage is really important too. Picking up a little bit of damage reduction and stuff over here from Elusive Dancer. We have a exceptional accuracy over here, which gives us more projectile speed, pierce chance, knockback, armor pen. All this stuff is just really good for our build. We go down here for raw boost. The flat raw boost isn't super duper important here, but the percentage raw damage is very nice. And so this just helps out quite a bit. You could also potentially go down to raw lock if you end up like doing some sort of mana stacking as well. But this didn't seem to really be as important as like going over here and getting more percentage raw damage. We also pick up a lot of armor pen right now. I have too much armor pen. You really only need this to be, I think, 100%. But right now I'm just like completely just shoving my gear together and trying to make it work for endgame. And then getting like Seasoned Hunter is here really good as well. If you don't need this armor pen or attack speed, you could potentially go into the Slormatologist, get more gold finds, Slormandrites, magic items found. All this stuff is pretty okay. You could even go over here for like more armor and aura effect if you want, but that's not necessarily super important. And we are using, let's talk about the gear. So I'm using the Ultimatum of Profound Depth, and this basically gives us area damage reduction, which is a defensive stat, which just makes us a little bit more tanky. And it's a nice thing to have. A lot of the scariest things that do damage to you in the game are area damage. You could definitely use the like XP one. I used the XP one for a long time until the zone level was basically outscaling this particular one. We could also use additional projectiles or even critical strike damage. But if you want to get tanky, I think that this is probably your best call. For the activation runes, we're using killing enemies into giving us a shield. We'll notice that like I have a pretty big shield. I have like 15,000 health, another 13,000 shield right now. That's because of the Thornbite rune, which is pretty good. I should probably go and like level this up to 15. And then the activation or enhancement rune we have is basically gives it a chance to trigger additional times. So whenever we trigger effect rune, it has an 11.5% chance to trigger again every second for the next 10 seconds. So very frequently, like this is just triggering over and over and over and over again. And because we just like kill lots of enemies, we kill 56 enemies, it triggers the rune. And then every single second for the next 10 seconds has a chance to trigger again. So very frequently you'll be killing like hundreds of enemies and your rune will just be continuously building up the shield for you. It does have a cap of basically 75% of your armor, LE res, and evasion though. So it can't go to the moon or anything like that. Now for gear, pretty much anywhere we can possibly get raw damage, we're going to want to get that. Either percentage raw damage or flat raw damage is super duper important in this build. You just want to stack raw damage. This is your main stat for getting damage. You just get raw damage everywhere. Raw damage here, raw damage everywhere. And if you don't have raw damage on the like gear directly, like in the magic or the rare stat or the base stat, you want to get it in the epic stat as well, which can be pretty expensive. You don't necessarily have to do that right away. Besides that, I look for a lot of like armor and elemental res, I think is pretty important, and max life as well. Like having life is kind of a multiplier for your defenses. So even though I have 51% armor here, if I don't have any life to defend, that's pretty bad. But having some life on there as well is pretty nice. On things like the bracers, for example, big important stat to have here is mana leech. Mana Leech is so important. I would say it's even worth like clicking so you can find it a lot easier over here. If you click a stat in your profile, it will highlight pieces of gear that have that stat. So like for example, if I clicked armor, this particular piece of gear would highlight over here on the side. And so like it's just a very important stat to have. It's going to make keeping your mana up pretty easy to do. Same thing with Life Leech, very important. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like you stacking armor, stacking raw damage, stacking resist, getting some life some places, life leech, mana leech, for bases, attack speed, raw damage. I'll hover over each piece of gear real quick. Everything's not 100% perfect just yet. We still have quite a bit to go. And none of these legendaries that you see are mandatory at all. This one just gives us even more movement speed. So you can see right now our movement speed is 7.4. Take the boost off, it goes down to 5.3, which is still pretty fast. I don't think that that's like super make or break. This ring is about to replace this actually. More movement speed. I get movement speed a lot of places as well. I think movement speed is very nice to have, but I think that maybe going past like 5 might be too much at times. It's a little bit hard sometimes to walk into portals. Make sure I hover over each piece of gear. This one gives us a little bit of avoidance and defenses. It really just had a great stat on it, so I just kept it, even though it's not perfect kind of thing. And then this amulet, I think, is pretty nice as well. Gives us more ultimatum levels, which is more defenses, which is pretty nice. The Awoken Hat, though, if you can get this, is super awesome. You can just like basically use 3 void shots and then use any other skill, and that's pretty good. Now, let's move on to part 2 of the video here, where we talk about the build that I was using to kind of level up. And this is actually pretty easy to do because I went and I saved this in here for you guys. And I saved this like, recently. So this is going to be kind of like still very updated modern gear. However, the skills are slightly different here. So we're using Architect of Death instead of Sharpshooter of the Wilds. Architect of Death is very, 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 very strong. We get great stuff here, like gold is fine, which is pretty good. We can go and get max mana, which can potentially give us more damage from if we go and take Raw Lock all the way down here. Probably wouldn't actually have this active. I should just take that out. There we go. But like you could potentially go and walk all the way down here to Raw Lock, which can give you quite a bit of mana, locked up because of this. So if we go and equip this, we get 3,000 more max mana, which makes Raw Lock give us quite a bit more raw. And like just the more raw damage you can get early on, the better it's going to be. But stuff like Gold is Fine is pretty good. Totem Increase effect, I think, is all right. This basically makes it so your totems last longer and do a little bit more damage. However, if you do Heavy Ballista, they don't last as long, but they do a lot more damage. And either one of these is just fine. I kind of prefer doing Totemic Might, though, because of the increased long lasting, because Totem's Renewal gives us 3% max life for every active totem under our control. And the other options here aren't super duper great. And this just kind of like allows us to drop down a totem and just get really tanky as we're just shooting out our skills nonstop. And then you can either go here and get yourself increased elemental damage, which is not super important until you get down to Force Transmission, which gives us more elemental res based on our elemental damage. And so this is pretty nice combination between these two. The Acidic Arrowheads is super amazing, because this makes it so that Arrow Shot, Rain of Arrows, and Immortal Arrow all apply poison, and poison basically just tears through shields and just makes life a lot easier. Okay, we're going to be using Arrow Shot as pretty much our main skill here. Then we get Speed, Violence, and Momentum for more Pierce, Fork, and Rebound chance. I don't really think that these other options are overly amazing, so this one's really good. And then we get Big Life Leech from the Leecher. Makes it so you don't necessarily need to find Life Leech on your gear as you're leveling up. Finding Mana Leech, though, is still pretty nice. For our main skill here, Arrow Shot is still pretty similar to what we were using before. More Rebound. You could potentially use Voracious Arrow early on. This really does help out with keeping your mana topped off, because you're getting a huge amount of mana every time you kill an enemy. I used this for a while until it felt like I could switch away from it. Probably once you have Mana Leech. And then Obsidian Arrowhead gives you more pierce chance. We're pretty much going to be in the lighted mode a lot, so you could potentially go here and do Arrow of Illusion. Now, if you aren't stacking evasion, this isn't as helpful, but like 25% more evasion is pretty nice. And like, so this kind of like allows you to, instead of just doing armor and armor and resistance, not energy shield. There's no energy shield in this game, Don. Come on. Armor and resistance, you could also go for evasion instead. And so this is kind of good here. I do think that going snapback is probably better though, because what this allows you to do is once you have the 150% rebound here, you can, whenever a shot rebounds, it increases its damage. If you hit a wall with an enemy, it does more damage, which is pretty nice. The so many arrows is pretty important here. This makes it so that the shot goes from being one single arrow to being several arrows here. So that is pretty darn nice. I don't really think that things like the projectile speed or the other options are nearly as good as more arrows. And then forking arrows have a 10% chance to fork again is pretty nice. We don't really need to take the other option here, which makes it so that you like apply poison, because you're going to be applying poison all of the time already, thanks to being Architect of Death with acidic arrowheads. Our other skill, our secondary skill, is Immortal Arrow. It's kind of hard to see because it won't show up right now, but Immortal Arrow is basically this little arrow that will fly around us and just murder stuff. Let's just hop in the Hippopotamus Bastion real quick. So the arrows will kind of come out and just automatically attack stuff that is near us, murderizing everything. And these are pretty nice. You don't really need to do or cast or set up anything. Have these wandering arrows kill stuff for you. But if you decide that you want to set it up so they're actually actively attacking, what you can do is just like hold right click and it will send out these instructions for what the arrow should do, and it'll like fly around. If you only click one time, the arrows will fly back and forth nonstop. And yeah, that's actually pretty useful. I'll show you here in a second why. So you can also just drop down your turrets as well. But this is all me not really like even pressing any buttons here. Just like letting our turrets and our immortal arrows kill everything for us. And it's a pretty nice like casual gameplay. However, the biggest damage is going to be coming from our left click. And so if you just left click and spam spacebar when it becomes available, you're pretty much going to be doing tons of damage during this. This can definitely like clear like Adam Nostris and some of the harder content. It is just going to be pretty darn zoomy for you. But with the Immortal Arrow, it has this neat little thing on here that not very many people I think know about, which is skewering stun. And I think that this is kind of broken because while Immortal Arrow has not completed any instructions, it stuns enemies hit for the next 4 seconds. But the wild thing is that Immortal Arrow has a 3.84 second cooldown right now, which means if you're sitting there fighting an elite, you can just put one instruction down, the arrow will go back and forth hitting them, and then when you send out the next instruction, they'll basically get like half of a second where they're not stunned, and so you can just be sitting there just murdering them in the face, and it's pretty safe to be, fighting most things. I know if an enemy does go invincible or immune, they will become unstunned as well. So you can't just like stun lock Adam Nostris to death, but you can stun lock a lot of bosses. And you can set this up here, Scholar's Arrow, so it hits a whole bunch. Or you can do like, pretty much any of these other options here. Per completed instruction, I think is also pretty okay here. But you kind of do want to go and send out a lot of instructions so that the instruction count here is very high. You can also go and we get this here. The arrow replenishment makes it so that it has mana on kill. This pretty much will solve a lot of your early game mana issues if you haven't gotten mana on kill yet or mana leech. And then you're pretty much going to be able to just keep, keeping your mana up with this. Most of these aren't super amazing, I don't think. The Bolt of the Immortals here might be worth looking at. It does cost you a little bit of mana. A lot of people are going to say Academic's Arrow is good because it gives you +1 Wandering Arrow. But I do think that if you want to lock down and stun elites, Skewering Arrow is the way to go. Academics, otherwise, if you're not planning on like spam casting it. Experienced Arrow makes it so that it has additional critical strike chance here. And then the companions makes it so that you have 2 additional wandering arrows, which does help out a lot. Similar to the other build, we want to get like as much raw damage everywhere that we can possibly get. There's a lot of different Reapers that are going to work for this. I used Adam Nostrus's bow for a very, very long time. We leveled this up to like 50 something before we got rid of it. Then we switched over to the Big Fury bow. If you don't find the Big Fury bow, you could do like Bow of the Trainee. I think you could even go and do like Bow of the Masterful Great Grandmaster, which evolves out of the Bow of the Master. This basically makes it so your primary skill has more mastery level. Since we're spamming this for damage, that's like 6 times, 5, damage there. That's like 30% more skill damage, which is pretty big. And so just being able to have that on your bow, I think is totally fine. You could also potentially go and use almost really any bow. I don't think that there's anything that's going to like necessarily fail here. Most powerful bow could also be pretty good. It says pretty high flat damage, just set up automatically. But like I said, I think that the Big Fury bow here is going to be the best. You kind of see the big difference there just from the percentage raw damage. And once this thing evolves, it just kind of goes absolutely crazy. So yeah, this thing is like really, really good. This won't flip over into a primordial bow until you are at the point where it's either level 100 minus whatever your bonus is, which you can see at Corey Ironbender over here. So this used to be like per kill, but now it's based on level cap. So we can see here that with Astorius, right now we have 21 reduced primordial cap. So it means around like level 79, this thing will evolve up into primordial. And so, yeah, I mean, just getting this bow is like pretty much a big play here. Let's hover over the gear again real quick. Pretty much just like mostly raw damage everywhere, getting ourselves like armor and resistance. You could also go invasion as well if you want. I think evasion is pretty good for this particular class. But that's pretty much what I was playing early on. Hopefully this video helps you out. We'll be doing more live gameplay here. I do have some more kind of like tweaks for the ultra end game here. I think I just found something that's going to like maybe revolutionize some of my build a little bit for super duper end game, but I have to do some more testing. So hopefully you guys have a good one. Come by the stream and we'll see you again soon.